Hello, everyone. Welcome back for what is the final, or maybe the penultimate session of this one-day workshop. I think we have enough material during the day that we could have easily arranged a two-day workshop based on the same material. However, it would have been challenging for most of the people to make themselves available for 2 days. So I think in the end, we made the right call of having brief but focused presentations for 1 day, and then to maybe excite the imagination and pique the interest of people. You can always go back and talk to individuals. All the presentations will also be ready. So this is more of a opportunity all day, almost all day, was involve most of the researchers talking to policymakers, sharing their work. Although it was mixed, so many policymakers were also speaking. But this is, call it like in reverse, where policymakers, practitioners, revenue authorities, people closely engaged with the cold face of tax collection. It is an opportunity for them to speak of the issues that they face, and in particular also talk about areas where they would want collaboration with researchers, either both domestic or international, or with IGC. Let me thank everyone on the panel. Let me thank the organizers, and in particular Anand for landing me on this panel. I thought he was a much better fit for this. We have. It's not every day that we have a fantastic panel. People with real expertise, people who have huge amounts of experience. So it's an honor and pleasure for me personally also to be part of this panel. Thank you everyone for being here. I will not spend much time in introducing people. Let me just say from my extreme left, we have Millie Nalukwago. I apologize to everyone, if I don't spell their name or pronounce their name properly. So, Assistant Commissioner for Research, Planning and Development, Uganda Revenue Authority. On my left is Charles Addae, Assistant Commissioner for Tax Analysis and Forecasting, Ghana Revenue Authority. On my right is Ezekiel Phiri, Director of Research and Policy, Zambia Revenue Authority. And then we have Denis Mukama, who was already on the panel, Head of Research, Rwanda Revenue Authority. Then we have Joseph Sirengo, Manager for Research, Knowledge Management and Corporate Planning, Kenya Revenue Authority. And we are very fortunate to have John Mapoha, Principal Economist from the Malawi Revenue Authority. Thank you, everyone. It's a wonderful opportunity to speak to so many people who know their area far better than anyone else. The structure of this panel would be that I'll request each of the panelists to say something briefly, maybe roughly like maybe 5 minutes each, on key policy challenges that they are facing, where they would want researchers and IGC and others to collaborate. So we'll go in order. And once the entire panel has presented, and some people will use presentations that they have brought, others are most welcome to speak from sitting at the table. Once we have gone through this one round, we'll try to build some conversation on the table and then open to question and answer. There'll be enough time for question and answers. So without further ado, let me request Millie to present her ideas.
One of the areas we're having quite a challenge is taxation of e-commerce and technology. It is with us here. It is making business very fast and a lot of returns. However, in the area of tax, we still have issues there. I'll not go through all those details. I'm sure we all know about e-commerce and the challenges we face vis-a-vis the benefits we get from it. The next we're looking at is property taxation, and specifically for revenue authorities, where we look at rental income tax. So rental income tax is on property, and property rates are on property. Rental income tax is collected by revenue authorities. Property rates are collected by local governments. So this is on the same base. However, we have challenges both by, even in our case of Uganda, even those who collect, for some local governments, they go out and tell the taxpayers that they are collecting rental income tax. So it becomes very challenging for us that when we get to these taxpayers, they believe they are being double taxed. We've tried to educate over and over again, but it's still a challenge. And that's one of the questions I also had for the team that presented on a system for local governments. I didn't get a chance to ask it, but the question was, how are we linking with the central government to facilitate the tax-paying population so that they are aware of the different taxes on the same base? Another area where we have quite some challenges is taxation of trade liberalization. Taxation and trade liberalization. How do we strike a balance? You find that in our economies, about 40% and above, for Uganda it's 40% of our revenues come from international trade taxes. However, we are all globalizing. We are going into these regional blocks. We are having, this morning, someone was talking about World Tax Organization rules that you can't break across the globe. So how do we strike that balance? You find that we have the free trade areas, and yet our revenues are still coming from trade, international trade. So that is then another area where we are having challenges, where we'd like to see collaboration. International taxation issues, I'll not go so much in detail about this. We all know about all the BEPS and all that is going on. We've tried so hard. We've tried to train people in international taxation. We've tried to join these global organizations, but still, we still have revenue flowing out of our countries, and we are unable to tap into it. So how do we work together to be able to address those issues? Then, of course, the role of research would help us to get more collaborative studies. We've realized in Uganda that every time we collaborate, even internally, when we collaborate with the Ministry of Finance, we've carried out like 2 studies. One was on tax to GDP, and all the policy measures from that research were taken on, and revenue was actually realized. Then when we collaborate even with World Bank and others and international firms, we get much better results. High net worth has been presented. We already have units. We have results. So this collaboration is very important for us to be able to improve. Maybe I'll just give a few areas where it is important to consider when we are collaborating. One of the areas I'll talk about is that for us to take up research, first of all, let's not research for the sake of building reports or books in the libraries. Let us have operational research that is actually going to be implemented. And for this to happen, we have to work very closely. We, the implementers, have to be part of the design right from the beginning. Then that will be easy. And then we undertake research that is coming out of the pains from the implementers. So this implies that we use simple and non-technical language. I know that for us, it has happened to us in Uganda. You write, and then on the other side, they are not picking. Even as we are presenting here, it occurred to me, if you noted our presentation didn't have the models and those other tables, we've learned along the way that these are good, but they are privy to only us, the researchers. When you get to share with others, you have to make it as simple as possible for them to pick what speaks to them. And that's the benefit we've also picked as we carry out research with some international research firms. They've moved from the very strict research writing and rules to more of implementation. So we strike a balance, because at the end of the day, you want your results to be used. So I'll just quickly run through what we've worked with IGC. Justine presented that very well. We're also working with International Center for Tax and Development. We talked about the high net worth individuals, and there are 3 other studies going on. Even with IGC, we are looking at data from procurement, and we are also planning to look at tax incentives and many other areas. Then we have UniWider. Why am I sharing more about UniWider? With UniWider, we are developing a database, an anonymized database of all data in Uganda Revenue Authority. And I believe when this is done, then life will be very easy for us working with IGC and any other research firm. Because one of the challenges we've been facing is the data is not anonymized. Every time we're trying to anonymize, then it is hard to get it back to the original state. So we are working with them to have this. We already have the machines now, and we believe that this will be a change. It will be a big change in terms of decision making. So I believe going forward, we'll be able to do quite a lot of work together with international firms, local firms, and internally with the URA. Then I also brought out a bit about the local farms. That is our local research center. And the beauty with this is now we can be able to do internal studies. We had a study some time back, I think 2014, where our VAT gap was 60%. And recently, we had a study together with our local farm, and we had a VAT gap of about 30%. So this was interesting that now we can be able to build skills internally, and we can decode what has been worked out and also find out what are the reasons why. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Please, I have a presentation, but I'm not going to follow this to save time. So I'll just take some few things from here and then discuss our challenges. I work with Ghana Revenue Authority, and I've been with them for a very long time with the policy and research unit. And there are certain challenges that we've been facing. One, I just want to remind us on the common questions around policy formulation and design that we all know, but sometimes we take them for granted. Number one of this that I want us to know is that when it comes to designing tax policy, what comes into our mind is tax policy only meant for revenue collection, just to raise revenue for government, or there are other purposes for tax policy. Now, if you look at these days, all the time, when governments are coming out with tax policies, all what they think about is revenue, forgetting about other tax policies, the effects that it can have on the economy. Now, the fundamentals for coming out with issues on tax policy, we have 6 very important fundamental issues that we have to consider. Number one is, why is it necessary for the tax policy to come into place? Is it, as I stated earlier on, for only revenue? We have other purposes of ensuring that fairness is in the economy. Everybody pays whatever is expected of the person. We need to look at other purposes like who is to be affected by this tax policy. That is the second pillar I want us to look at. Who is to be affected by this tax policy? Companies and businesses, self-employed persons, employees, importers and exporters, the professionals, and others. If we are coming out with a policy and we don't consider these people, when the policy is issued, when it comes to implementation, then we tend to have a lot of challenges. Now, the other pillar we have to look at is when and where and how would these persons be affected? Do we really consider them clearly for us to know if we implement these policies, we'll get results? Now, the next item, which is the last one, the pillar I want to talk about is what exactly is required of these tax people, the people who want to tax or who are affected by the policy. What do we want to do? What are we expecting from them? Now, the taxpayers, if it comes to implementing policies, they must know what they are responsible for. What are their responsibilities? What are they required to do? Now, when are they supposed to pay their tax liabilities? At what time, in what mode are they supposed to present this? Now, do we consider all this? Sometimes with tax administration, we take things for granted that they all know all these issues, and then instead of educating them, sensitizing them on what they are expected to do, we neglect it and assume that taxpayers know what they are expected to do. These 6 items are very, very important fundamental issues that we need to consider when we are designing tax policy. I just want to repeat them for refreshment of our what we know, but sometimes we take for granted. I said the pillars are 6. Number 1 is why the policy. 2, who is affected by the policy. 3, we have when. 4, where. 5, how will the persons affected by the policy going to behave? Then the last one is what exactly is required of them. Now, in Ghana, we read our budgets normally around November for the incoming year. Targets for tax revenue are set, and the government decides its expenditure around November before we enter into the year that we have set in the budget for. Now, at this time, tax policies are raised. We are going to do A, B, C, D, and revenue impacts are estimated and then added to the baseline that is using our models to raise tax revenue. Now, let's get into the year and see what happens. The effect of the policies that are supposed to be implemented takes effect from January, and it's supposed to run from January to December. Now, when these policies are listed and we estimate the tax revenue and added it, we have done that and added it to the estimate, and the government has planned its expenditure based on that. We just enter into the year, and then it comes to implementation, and that becomes a problem. Sometimes because of logistics, sometimes because of legislation procedures, and sometimes even throughout the year, some of the policies are not implemented. Sometimes they implement some of them around September, getting to the end of the year. Meanwhile, the revenue impact has been added, and as I stated earlier on, most tax policies are supposed to raise revenue for the government. Now, when it comes to that point, then the revenue authorities are challenged as to how to meet these targets. An example is a policy which the government wanted to introduce in Ghana in 2017 to improve the performance of VAT. By name, electronic point of sales device. Now, we have spoken a lot about it today. Ghana, we haven't started yet. We wanted to start this last year, 2017. An estimated value of 500 million Ghana cedis was added to the target to come out of this or to be raised from this policy. The whole of 2017, we were not able to implement it. We came to 2018, when the budget was being read, the policy was raised again. As I'm talking today, we have not been able to implement it. So my challenge and my question to you, the researchers, is how do we implement such policies? If we want to implement policies and we estimate the revenue impacts and government plans expenditure on this, and we are not able to raise it, what happens in the economy? And then what are the blames for tax authorities on this? Why should we blame them for not achieving targets? How do we plan implementation of tax policies in such a way that we'll be able to raise the necessary revenues that we are expected from it? Thank you.
Before I request Ezekiel, let me share my own experience of how did we set targets as I think I mentioned. I work in the Ministry of Finance for quite a while, and we had a system for setting targets. So we looked at what the revenue authority, in that case, like a local authority, collected last year. So say it was 100. Then we picked up a number out of thin air, and we said that this year your target is 140. And they would come back to us, 140 is too high. The real potential of the economy is, I don't know, we can't collect more than 105. And then this back and forth will go on, and we'll settle on a number, say 110. Next year, most likely that number will not be achieved, and we'll always come up with some ex post justification of why the target wasn't achieved. So either there were too much rainfall or too less rainfall. So ex post, it's easy to come up with some. But the real challenge was that there was no real information on, call it the true tax potential. So partly it's an informational challenge. And one of the ways, at least we started addressing that, was digitizing. And that's a challenge that Millie also mentioned, of having everything in manual records. So that's one part of the challenge. In the absence of that, it is just a bilateral negotiation. So anyway, I don't want to take more time. So let me request Mr. Ezekiel to share his thoughts.
Thank you, Anna. I will share my story from the table. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure most of the things that I will say either have already been covered by my colleagues, and I will not take time on them so much. The first thing I want to mention is you were actually doing me a favor. You covered my first point on my written presentation. The issue of target setting is also a very critical issue that we've been facing, especially with regard to our principals, Minister of Finance, where the information around the optimal level of revenue, where do you set it? So there's that back and forth, and it's a very important question that we need to answer with certainty as to where do you want to be, what is the optimal level of revenue. So that's a very important consideration. The next one is around the cost. At what cost are you collecting that tax? So even when we are when proposals are floated and we're asked for our opinion, I think the issue of the cost is a very important aspect of it. So we have to think around what mechanisms are we going to use to collect that particular tax. So being mindful of the cost, like the previous presenters had done, the cost on the administration and also the cost of compliance by the taxpayers. The other issue is regarding the fairness, and that's where our role as administrators comes in to go and tax everyone else who is supposed to be taxed. So it's the issue of now, and this has been the story around the informal sector. And I'll share with you when coming to challenges, when I come to challenges as to some of the issues that we have put in place. We had to advocate for expansion of the law to appoint tax agents so that they can help us to go into the hard-to-tax areas, the informal sector. So like we are in the process of launching relationships with various tax agents that we have actually appointed to deal with that issue of fairness so that there's that equity. There should not only be fairness, but we should actually be seen to be pursuing that goal to make sure that everyone is contributing to the tax net. Then the other issue is to do with the practicality of implementing the measures. Sometimes you can have a measure floated, but in terms of going on the ground to go and implement, you find that you're having challenges to implement that. So we always want to have information around how practical is it to go into certain areas to go and pick out the tax that is required by policy. And of course, the last bit on the policy side is the issue of how do you ensure that you are consistent with the overall government goals? Because maybe it might not just be revenue, but how do you make sure that you are you are synchronizing with other goals which are not revenue in nature per se, much as revenue is very important. Then coming to the areas where maybe more research needs to be done, of course, it will not be limited to the list that I'll present due to time, is, for example, the area where Kelvin and the group, in conjunction with the IGC researcher and others, the area of PE gap. In fact, I'll generalize it to the gap studies, but particularly on PE, what we've noted is that in that area where Kelvin and group presented that is one of the areas where we need to do more exploration and find solutions. Another one is that you know that we are implementing a withholding type of arrangement in terms of the pay-as-you-earn. But for employees who work for diplomatic missions, the privileged ones, they're actually supposed to do self-declaration. And there's a lot of leakage in that area because some of them opt not to declare. So there's a bit of potential in that area as well, which we can need to, which needs evidence-based information just to establish the gap and the reasons why the Zambians that are working for various diplomatic missions are not complying as they should. So it's an area that we might need to look at. Another area consistent with what the guest speaker said, the guest of honor, is to do with the area of high net worth individuals. I think there was a contribution from our team that so far we've only identified 40, but of course it's an issue of design and where we've set the thresholds and the parameters that need to be set. So we have a lot to learn from those that have implemented. Our colleagues from Uganda, we have a lot to learn from there. Then regarding the work we've done with IGC, which requires constant update, is the issue of VAT gap. We've done VAT gap studies. I think we did one in 2013. We did an update in 2015. It's just that we've not publicized that work that much. But what remains to be done in that area is probably to do a further refinement in terms of doing the split between policy gap and the administration gap, the compliance gap, because we didn't go into that detail in that study. So I think there's also scope to do more refinement in that area and do some more work. The other one which Dr. Pamu had mentioned was to do with SMEs, the taxation of SMEs. We're having a lot of collaboration in this area, especially with GIZ. They're supporting in this area, but we see a lot of potential. And that's why I mentioned that we are having a lot of, we've gone further to even amend the law to provide for agency, apart from the agents, the tax agents that are withholding agents on behalf of the government, like the employers and those that are withholding VAT. We have actually gone into relationship to appoint private entities or associations to actually help us to be our tax agents in the field so that we lower the cost of collection. Then the issue of rental income, I think, has been mentioned. It's also a challenge in our area. We require a very detailed study in terms of a survey to look at rented property, what is the gap, and so on. We've done some work in it, but I think we need to do a lot more. Taxation of telecom sector is also another area. It's a very specialized area. And as the Revenue Authority, what we've done is we've, in conjunction with our Minister of Information, there's a project underway looking at we are establishing a telecommunications transaction monitoring system where we'll be monitoring in real time the transactions. And what we are interested in as the Revenue Authority is actually the revenue assurance module, where it will be more like an auto audit so that whatever is going on is also received at the Revenue Authority in real time. So you utilize the system to actually reduce the burden on auditors in terms of auditing, because you will have set all the parameters on the system to try to assist in that regard. Recently we engaged in an important project with the IMF, the data matching, which I think there was some aspects of it in terms of doing data matching. We have a lot of systems, but these systems are not talking to each other. And so we are currently undertaking of course I don't need to mention this because it's a project already going on, but just for information is that it's an ongoing project, but it's going to really bring out results like the ones that I've have been outlined by our colleagues in terms of comparing maybe purchases with sales and so on in the area of VAT. So this, in terms of our current focus, we are focusing on matching the data that is on our custom system versus the ones that are on our inland system. So that will bring out a lot of gaps that we expect in terms of covering the compliance gap which is there. So I think for now, I'll leave it at that. Of course, there are several other areas where we're having some interventions. Thank you.
I like being free when I have my 5 minutes of fame, so I don't want to feel so much constrained. So, most of the things that I'm going to, most of them have been talked about. We wanted to talk about the considerations when setting up the tax policy. What are the key considerations? And much of the things that we consider at the RA, because we have a tax policy unit. And this unit is responsible trying to, review and, try to inform the Ministry of Finance in terms of tax policy and the design. So there are a number of key questions that we have or we put into consideration. And those are the ones that I'm going to really base on in like 2 minutes. And most of them will have a huge similarity to what my colleague Charles already said. That's exactly it. So one of the considerations we have is, you need to know the purpose for the policy. So that will inform how you're going to design the policy. Most of the tax administrations or most of the policies, like Charles said, are usually tax-oriented. But we need to also be considerate that some of these tax policy can be used to address some other issues that are not particularly related to tax. They could be health-related targets, could be environmental-related targets. So these are some of the considerations. What is the purpose? By knowing the purpose, you're able to design the relative of the appropriate tax policy and its design. Then there are issues, of course, what's the impact? You need to come up with the impact of these policies prior to them going out. Some of the things we see that usually, as a tax administration, our main consideration is the revenue and compliance aspects of it. So you want to consider how is this policy going to affect our overall target as a tax administration. But on the other hand, you may also want to look at the impact on the wider aspects of the social economy. Much as you're looking at the aspect of compliance and all this, but what about the side effects of this policy measure or the tax design that you're proposing or putting forward? Then the other thing, again, that Charles alluded to is proportionality. Are we having a tax policy, or are we designing a tax policy that is too drastic? That is way far-fetched from the norms. And when you have these, how is it going to affect the response of the taxpayers? Or is it, if it's targeting a certain goal, is it too little? So these are some of the considerations we make. How practical is it anyway? You need something that is practical given your environment under which you're operating. And then there are issues, of course, we realize we're not working in isolation. We are now pushing for globalization, we are regional integration. So you need to know what your next neighbor is having. I usually give this example. If you are going to rent a place and you find that your neighborhood, every time you open up your door, your neighbor is killing you with the smell of fried chicken. And for you, your main source of food is probably vegetables. You may cause a problem to your spouse. They may want to go and eat at the neighbor's house. So in trying to avoid this, so you need to know what your neighbor is doing. If you need to know what Uganda is doing. If it's lowering now a given rate, you may also want to consider following down that route. So once in a while, you may need to buy chicken so that you keep the spouse excited. Then there are issues, of course, the unintended consequences. You need to consider what are the, if by going down this road, you consider what are the likely unintended consequences. And finally, looking at the... Okay, I think I'm being challenged by... Yeah. Finally, looking at the evidence of research. Here we are trying to see how can we ride on research? How can we ride on research as tax administrations, to inform our policy decisions? And most of these papers that were presented today were actually alluding to this. One thing I need to start with a caveat is usually research, evidence or research to give you any meaningful results, it is purely on the quality of information that you have. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. And that's one of the caveats. And for us as a tax administration in RA, we've put more effort now onto refining the quality of data. We have a whole project funded under the DFID and to try and make sure we clean our database, because we are now seeing the importance of having the quality data to inform your decision making. Secondly, research only, it helps you to gather insights on large amounts of data. Today it was alluded to, as tax administrations, we have plenty of data. Ophir, I think, said something about sitting on gold mines. And it is true. But it is similar to giving, and again, forgive my example, it's similar to giving a dog bundles of money. If you're lucky, it will bite a few, tear off a few nuts, but he will not get anything constructive from that amount. It's the same way with the tax administration. You have all these large amounts of money, of data, but if you cannot put them to proper use, it's useless. We always have these things of interfacing with the national water. You want to interface with the national banks. You keep adding, and all these volumes of data. But with research, it's the only way you can put this data to proper use. We had a project with ICTD where we used just a bit of the communication strategy. We have all these taxpayers, small, large, and we targeted just through communication. Personalize a message. Tell them, dear Denis, we realize you have given us, are you sure this is the right declaration? Just that. No one in Rwanda was used to having a personalized message from the tax administration. And before we knew it, within the next month, we got so many revisions of the declarations. $8 million worth came in from the small taxpayers. So if it wasn't for research, all this money would have been out there. So the other thing is, again, it helps anchor. Usually when tax policy design or tax policy is being put together, there is a lot of intuition. We have good insights, good intentions. We want to use tax policy for good cause. We know, we have a feeling that if we give so much incentives, we will get the FDI inflow. The intuition behind is so good. But you can only get the reality if you engage research and you realize, I try to establish how effective has this policy been of trying to attract investors. And this again, I think also alludes to what Millie said. What's the delicate balance between taxation and trade facilitation? So these are the reasons why most of the countries are now on the competing for investors, and you end up actually eroding even the little tax revenue you'd have got. So it is vital that you engage, you use research to inform you that this policy has been in place, but it's not working. The incentives are actually going to a sector that we did not intend. They're being sold on the market, the goods that come in. So then finally, how do we use, research. Research, when you engage research, with the different techniques involved in research, you can refine or you can improve your formula, your policy. So with that, I'd like to thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sirengo from the Kenya Revenue Authority. I'll take you through tax policy design at the KRA and evidence or where research can assist. Yeah, I think my colleagues have already gone through most of these points. I just want to mention that when setting up the tax policy, we really consider how much revenue we can generate from the economy, then also bearing in mind impact on distribution of resources, equity, fairness to the taxpayers, aligning and also aligning the structure to the overall goals of the government, ensuring that the policy does not negatively impact on the ease of doing business, and also minimizing the potential for tax-based erosion, and importantly also to ensure that there is stability in the fiscal policy. And we also make sure that there is flexibility in the tax structure to ensure that any changes in the economy can be accommodated without really adverse impacts on the tax structure. Now, after this, I will just have to mention a few highlights about the tax in Kenya. Our tax to GDP ratio is about 18%. We usually benchmark with South Africa, where South Africa it's over 27% of GDP. Our cost of collection is at 1.3%. You saw the one of South Africa was 0.9%. We are also aiming at that. And we also collaborate with the revenue authorities within the East African community. You heard Millie referring to the Kenyan case more oftenly. Also, we benchmark with the Rwanda Revenue Authority, Burundi Revenue Authority, Tanzania Revenue Authority. Yeah, all the revenue authorities within the East African community. And this is because we have similar, more or less similar, more similarities in the economy, in our economies, and also we would wish to harmonize our taxes so that there is no opportunities for evasion or smuggling within the region. We are now working on harmonizing domestic taxes across the region and we already have a common external tariff within the region. Now, in terms of practical evidence and research, first and foremost, we realize that we really need to have support from the leaders, and that one has always been guaranteed. The areas where we're having challenges are actually tax incentives, which sometimes are caused through lobbying. Particular sectors in the economy use their industry representatives to come and lobby for exemptions or tax holidays. And that one is actually not based on research, and it affects the efficiency of the tax system. We also have very strong lobby groups that look at the interests of the consumers. For example, they would wish that all taxes on essential goods should be removed. We had a challenge when we were modernizing our VAT statute in 2013, where we had, out of research, we had proposed to remove, to put essential goods under the standard rate of the VAT at 16% from zero rate. But this one, we made a lot of resistance from lobby groups, and most of those essential items had to be taken back to the VAT 0%. But then the challenge is that when these items are put at 0%, the benefits are usually not passed on to the consumers. Those ones just go to the manufacturers or suppliers. Yeah. So our research evidence has shown that if we need to target any special groups in terms of providing incentives, it will be best done from the expenditure side and not the revenue side of the budget. And therefore, that's also an example where research has shown that actually we don't really require to provide those incentives from the revenue side. We found out that actually most of the poor do not consume a large percentage of processed items. And therefore, the support would be maybe providing support from the expenditure side instead of giving a blanket zero rate VAT on those items. The same case with the school materials. We needed a targeted way of providing support to pupils from poor families in terms of cushioning them from the impact of the VAT on books. But again, that one was defeated. And research had shown that you lose revenue when you just put a blanket zero rate on those books, because it still benefits pupils who are going to high-cost schools. It also benefits pupils from poor families. Yet the intention was just to target the benefit to the pupils from poor schools. So there you find that there is no targeting. If at all of them will buy books at the reduced rate. After that, I just want to go through some areas where we have had collaborations with other institutions in terms of research to support our tax policy. Yeah, we have worked with the World Bank on trying to come up with optimal tax rates for the corporation income tax. That study is still ongoing. We are yet to get the results. We shall get results by end of December. We are also working with the International Monetary Fund on doing VAT gap analysis. We have preliminary results show that the compliance rate for VAT is just about 50%, and the compliance gap is actually 4 to 4.5% of GDP. So that one, once the study is complete, I think we shall get more insights on how we can reduce the VAT gap. We are also working with the researchers also from the University of Austria on the simplification of VAT filing and payment for small firms. For example, we want to see if at all we could come up with an application, mobile application software, where payment and filing of return can still be done as a single step using a mobile phone, so that maybe every month or every quarter, a small trader can be able to use the mobile phone to file and pay. So that is also ongoing. We are also working with the Swedish Tax Agency on transforming the way we undertake our enforcement. Kenya Revenue Authority has been known for using force or a comparative approach in ensuring that taxpayers comply. We want to move away from that and use more of facilitation. So we are working with the Swedish Tax Agency on that. Then we are also getting assistance from South African Revenue Service on data analytics. For the past over a decade, we have spent a lot of time and resources in automation. Now our systems are automated. The challenge is now, how do we use the data that is existing within these systems to enhance our performance? So that one, SARS is assisting us on advanced data analytics, data matching and use of third-party data, all that. Then we are also, as I said, we are also collaborating within the region in the East African Revenue Authority. revenue authorities to benchmark among ourselves to see how we are performing by looking at various indicators of tax administration and see how we can improve, especially in addressing common challenges within the region. We also work together with our local policy research, Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis, on some research areas. Right now, we are working with them to do an impact assessment of the accessible goods management system. Yeah. Now, finally, I go to the challenges we are facing. I have already mentioned the challenges now with regard to data, big data analytics, which SARS is assisting. We have had the challenges with on taxation of high net worth individuals. We are borrowing from the experience of URA, and they are assisting us so much to go into this. Then also informal sector, we are having challenges actually taxing the informal sector. I had also SARS mentioning that they use the turnover tax. We have realized that actually the turnover tax is very expensive to administer, and we don't really get all the players to file and pay. We are looking into that. Right in the last budget, the cabinet secretary in charge of finance made some changes to go back to presumptive tax, where now we want to twin the payment of single business permit to the tax in the informal sector, and he proposed 15%. So 15% of the value of the single business permit to be able to penetrate the informal sector and more so be able to get information on the players from the sector. I mentioned also about the exemptions and tax incentives and the challenges of how we could address the support to the poor from the expenditure side. And the final challenge is actually now taxing the e-commerce. This is an area where we also believe maybe if we partner with other research institutions and supporters like IGC, they may assist us in penetrating the e-commerce in terms of taxing that sector. Thank you very much.
My name is John Boha, as been said. I'm from the Ministry of Finance, Revenue Policy Division. Basically responsible for tax policy design, revenue forecasting, among others. So I think most of the speakers are from revenue authorities. I may represent some of the guys from Ministry of Finance. In Malawi, of course, we have a number of challenges also in terms of tax collection. Of course, at the moment, I would say our tax to GDP ratio on average ranges between over the past 10 years about 17 to 19%. And one considered to be high, but we know that there's more room how we can collect revenue, because we still think that our tax tax compliance is still very low. From one of the third assessment reports in 2015, we noted that the Revenue Authority, they really don't have an automated system. They don't really know the number of taxpayers or to monitor the filing. So we really have challenges. And one of the things I was saying, what can evidence and research help? I think that research is going to help us quite a lot, because one of the challenges is that to have an informed tax policy design is still a challenge. I would give an example. Around 2015 or so, we wanted to introduce, reviewing our tax, our VAT exemption rates as a rate. So we wanted to introduce the VAT on water, because they say, okay, how can you tax water? Water is something that is an essential. So there was a lot of resistance around it, and we just see that because there are people who are in business of selling water, so and they're saying that we're going to introduce VAT on water, So but despite the resistance and the the Minister of Finance was strong about it. We managed to introduce VAT on water. At the same time, we had introduced VAT on milk. It just lasted 1 year. The other year, it was removed because of the lobby groups. So we think that if we can have evidence-based design of the policies, we will not have some of these changes that happen now and again. Because we have a long list of exemptions, long list of zero rates, and that was argument to say, okay, these are the products which are consumed by the poor. It doesn't really hold. We don't, most all the products on VAT should be taxed, because we cannot ring-fence those products that these are only consumed by the poor. Okay, so I think the research around those areas will inform our decisions and make sure that our tax policy is stable, not like each and every year we change, and for the businesses is also a challenge. Of course, we in terms of tax administration, there are some of the reforms which are currently going on. Like the automation of domestic taxes, and for customs now, taxpayers they can pay using their mobile phones on their tax, or whether import a car or goods, as long as they have made the declaration, they can pay from their phone or from the bank, whichever way they choose. So we think that that way we can help in reducing the cost of paying tax. But still more, there's now a project going on to automate all the domestic taxes where there is a challenge. Because the idea is we want to improve taxpayer service. A taxpayer could go into their revenue authority account and see their tax liability and also make their assessment. And maybe just some of the specific issues which maybe would want the IGC to help us. Some have mentioned already. Because the objective or tax policy really is make sure that we want to expand tax base and also reduce tax compliance. Okay, so the one of the areas expanding tax base, want to see how best you can tax the informal or the SMEs sector, and also evaluation of the effectiveness of tax incentives. As I said, each and every year, there are lobbies. We have these tax incentives, but we haven't evaluated. Are they working? Okay, we'll give incentives to the tourism sector, maybe mining sector, but what's the effect on the economy? And also another area which we also have a challenge is we receive a lot of donor support, but there are clauses where say they don't pay tax. How much have we forgone? Could there be a way of how can influence policy around having some of development partners, because they give money, but there's even the third parties they should not pay tax. So we see that's another area where we're losing revenue, because the contractors they don't pay tax. So we would have studies around how best the development partners can help us. Some of the development partners like World Bank, they allow the contractors to pay tax, but others there's still a problem. So I think those areas they can help us. Another issue about collaborative research, I think one of the areas which we have noted is that when we involve all the stakeholders, they'll buy in, like Minister of Finance, Revenue Authority, and the international researchers, it would really help. Because at the end of the day, whatever research that we're going to do, if it's going to be effective, it should help in either improve, because it has to lead to change of the tax laws or something. So they should be buying from both Revenue Authority, Minister of Finance, so that it will be easy to pass the legislations at the end of the day. So these are the points that I had. I thank you very much.
Thank you, John. In the end, I think I'll also request every member of the panel to give their final comments. I was also struck by the fact that although we covered all the substantive areas of taxation. There was less mention of, say, tax enforcement areas, tax administration reform, tax morale, voluntary tax compliance in those areas. So, anyway, for the panelists to reflect.
I think I'll begin with there was the lottery incentive for consumer participation in taxation. I'll make a comment and then maybe Zedare can respond. I know that we did this in Zambia about 5 or 6 years ago. I think the program was called, very interesting, Win a Nissan Hardbody. I think by then there was a gentleman who was at Zedare. He's even moved on. But it was the same scenario where the client gets a receipt and then you put in some drums and people win, but in the end they use those receipts to do some audit. We've never seen that proceed go on. So was it a success? Did it work well? Did it find political problems? What happened with it? Why haven't we continued with it? Because now we're seeing it as a research proposal in the presentations, but we've been doing it and then we've stopped. So maybe that would be one question. And then just maybe some suggestion on the research part. Thank you, Joseph. He's mentioned things about lobbying. I know in Zambia, we have to start by looking at the structure of the economy before you even go this far. If the economy is not well diversified, then you can have one firm that is probably 60% of your GDP, and if they speak, you have to listen. I think for us, mainly the mines are the biggest part of the economy, and I think not only in taxation, even in utilities, for instance, we know that they pay the least in terms of cost for electricity, because they can easily lobby and say, we will not invest unless you give us this rate. So how is the pressure from the ZRA point of view? Is it easy to tax mines? We know that even the tax incentives are not negotiated at ZRA level. Sometimes they're negotiated at president level. So how does the administration of tax come in when they are so powerful? And then there's also another issue of ownership. I'll give an example of most of the mines. We have a bit of ownership from ZCCMIH. In the recent past, ZCCMIH is helping us to bring out issues of tax avoidance, which I believe that from the ZRA point of view, maybe capacity may not be there. If you remember the issues of, for instance, parent branch lending, where a mine in Zambia borrows from the parent company abroad, and then you find the rates of borrowing are 10 times more than the market rate. It had to take the part owner of these mines to bring out these issues. And that is now when we are getting all these issues that we're actually using Zambia as a cost center. Because all they do is, for instance, they'll sign an agreement that they'll do a futures contract to supply copper, but they're supplying to a special purpose vehicle company, MED, and then they sign an agreement that the price is locked when they know the forecast is that the price will go up. So once they lock it, then Zambia begins to lose out because you'll be exporting to this special purpose vehicle at a locked price. When the price goes up, then all the profits go to the head office and then the Zambian company loses. So there are all these issues that come up. I don't know how ZRA will look into this. And then just...
Can you be brief? I want to bring many other people.
Just one last one. Maybe just to give a final issue. If you look at taxation, for instance, in Zambia, the main determinants of the tax policy will be the fiscal policy. So how government spends and behaves is what will determine the tax policy. And then on top of that, it will be issues to do with debt and performance of the government securities, because that is what finances government operations. The moment you see these two not doing well, no matter what research you do, everything goes haywire and government just increases or decreases or introduces new tax measures. So I think this, and then just to end on a lighter note, maybe the revenue authorities should consider removing the A at the end.
Okay. I think you have had your share. So
putting S like SARS.
Let me move on to the gentleman, the other gentleman at the back. Yeah, James, the gentleman next to you. Yes.
Thank you. My question goes to ZRA. You've mentioned that you're coming up with tax agents. What criteria did you use to find these tax agents that are coming? Okay. Then Malawi, I think on VAT regarding water, what were some of the negative issues that citizens were bringing out? Then finally, my sister from Uganda, You know that we are aware that you had to put up a social media tax. How do you view in terms of, or how do you rate the consultations that you did? Were they enough? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, my question goes to the gentleman from Malawi, Minister of Finance. I'd just like you to shed more light on, taxation of water. What exactly do you mean? Because maybe we might get a few insights. We have something in the pipeline. Yeah.
My name is Kampamba Shula. I'm from the Chamber of Commerce, also representing the Zambia Private Sector Alliance. I represent the private sector, and to be honest, our view is we're looking for lower tax rates, but government is looking for more revenue. Now, tax evasion is mixed with tax avoidance. Now, to be point blank, tax evasion is illegal, but I'll put forward and say that crime pays. The logic is as follows. Crime is a function of expected gain less expected loss. Expected loss is a function of your probability of getting caught times the punishment. Now, what am I speaking of? There was a presentation by, I think that was Dr. Mola in the morning. He alluded to how evasion is actually measured. Now, I'm going to stick on evasion for a bit. Just give me a bit of time to explain. The Allingham model relates to something by Gary S. Becker, who won a Nobel Prize for his economics of crime. Where am I getting at with this? It relates to 3 things that are needed to influence someone to avoid evasion. That's 1, the probability of getting caught. 2, the tax rate, which is the marginal rate at which he makes his choice whether to evade or not. And 3, it's the punishment. These I'm borrowing from Gary S. Beck. Now, as the private sector, we've been trying to find a bridge to reach forward to our counterparts at the ZRA. My colleague here, Musa Saudi, mentioned non-filing of returns for emerald mines. And I believe maybe you didn't understand what he was meaning, but in essence, he was saying there's a way that ZRA and the private sector can partner to reduce evasion. And at the Chamber of Commerce, we've come up with a solution. It's a multivariable calculus solution to the equation. So this is the equation as it goes. Tax revenue is equals to the tax rate times simplification of the tax rate times the probability of getting caught times compliance over evasion minus the cost to the authority. But not just to be theoretical, let me be practical. At the Chamber of Commerce, our members, like the Zambia breweries, also have issues with tax evasion. So to put it differently, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And even in the private sector.
Okay, may I request you to come to
Okay,
your
sorry,
question
let me
and
just wrap up. So with Zambia breweries, for example, they estimate that the authority loses close to $140 to $170 million per year through illegal alcohol. The government cabinet approved a new policy, alcohol policy, to increase tax rates. It's part of the policy in the alcohol policy, and it recommends increasing tax rates. Now, let me explain a different view that we have from the private
Can you briefly
sector.
come to your question?
Yes. No, I'm getting to it. There are 30 companies in the country which produce junta, which is a bottle size of this alcohol, which costs less than a Coke. This junta is the cause of a lot of alcohol abuse. But yet government to come up with a policy to increase tax rates. Now, as the private sector, we're willing to work with them and tell you, tax junta and solve the solution. Now, when it comes to partnerships, ZRA has appointed withholding tax partners. Now, let me explain how the private sector is receiving this. Because when you appoint a withholding tax agent, you by de facto give them advantage in cash flow. This is what private sector people are complaining. That when you appoint someone as an agent, you're giving them a de facto advantage over other people. So what we're saying is, two ZRA and across the board.
Okay, thanks. I
How
think you've
do
made
you
your point. Let's
engage
move on.
private sector?
Okay, thank you. Thanks. You've made your point.
I have a question and also just 2 comments. the comment. By and large, it is shown that most cash economies tend to have, as it were, low tax morality. Okay, but if transactions are done on electronic basis or using paper money, there's tendency to show that there's higher compliance because it leaves a trail. So in a sense, would ask that we have a triad of the Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank, and the Revenue Authority to advocate more and more for electronic transaction because it leaves a trail and it's easy to audit. That's my comment. Then the second one, which we tackled just briefly, but we needed to do some thrashing around it. It's about staff retention in the revenue authorities in Africa. Okay, staff retention. There was an interesting case that we're working on in tax justice and poverty under the Jesuit institutes in Europe and also in Africa, where a person from a revenue authority who was investigating a case pertaining to a certain institution, okay, he's given a job by that institution which he or she was investigating, and they paid them so well that he had to switch from a tax enforcer to go and work for a tax delinquent institution. So you touched on it briefly, Dr. Khan. Thank you so much. But we need to look at it and thrash some issues around it. Staff retention. Now, my question relates to taxation of high net worth individuals. And this is on the prosecution side. How successful have you been as a Uganda Revenue Authority with regard to the prosecution rate of high net worth individuals as it relates to tax evasion? I know, yes, in Europe, they've been quite successful. We've seen some, not to mention names, some footballers and some high net worth tax individuals being asked to pay taxes and being prosecuted. So I think, let me rest my case at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the feedback. I will start by answering the question on how do we bring taxes on board, including social media and others. We have a procedure of consultation. As a revenue authority, we work with the Ministry of Finance, where we present our proposals and the ministry gets in their proposals. They also get input from civil society, from accountants. So they go around and collect information. Then we sit together, do an analysis, and then present the proposals to the parliament, and these are passed. But we do engagements, and in Uganda, most of the proposed tax policy measures come out into the media and the newspapers about a month before the budget is actually read. So for all comments, they come in, and we also have civil society who carry out sessions, workshops, and they take the society through the different proposed tax measures that are coming on board. So that's the process of consultation that we go through. On the point of high net worth individuals, like we shared in our presentation before, in URA, we haven't looked at the side of prosecution because, and this is a very important point, is that our economies can't be compared with other economies. Our high net worth individuals are very influential. A high net worth individual can cause a change in the tax law. So we do not go that direction. And I thought I had overemphasized that we look at working with them, interaction, and we approach them on a one-on-one basis, and we use having knowledge. I collect as much knowledge about you, the high net worth individual, including studying your traits, what kind of person would you like to approach you. And our interaction is more or less confidential. So your information doesn't go out. And we found that that encourages them to pay. So we haven't gone to the side of prosecution because we know the laws are there, they are available. But so far, our interactions have been positive, and we patiently, continuously approach these high net worth individuals. Probably with time, we'll get into the prosecution side, but we haven't yet. And like I said earlier, for us, we took the model of start. So we will get there when the time comes. But for now, we are still working on sharing information, interacting with them, interviewing them, convincing them and encouraging them to pay. Some of them are very serious policy makers, but you won't believe that I have to sit with you and talk to you and convince you to pay. But that's the direction we've taken. Just because we cannot compare ourselves with developed economies, our African economies are structured different. And that's why I have a passion for research where we completely work together, because you find what works elsewhere will not work in our kind of economy. And we don't have a right to judge why our economies are the way they are, but we have to work around and ensure that we grow them. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment on the lottery that a colleague just raised, that in Zambia, the lottery for demanding receipts, and then these receipts are later, turned into lottery and people were winning. If I heard the presentations well, in the morning, it came out that people tend to prefer getting immediate returns than waiting till future. That the people, when you go to a store and then you buy your item and you don't demand receipts, you get it at a lower price. But if you get it, you demand for receipt, you get it at a higher price. And but there was a question that we need to research on this thing and see how we can improve on this instead of using lottery. We in Ghana, we are trying to implement such a policy at the electronic point of sales device for our VAT. We have done research on it, and our visit to Kenya showed that they had a lot of improvement in revenue. We are yet to implement ours. We are having challenges. But I would want to know, and if others countries who have implemented it, if you can share your knowledge on how revenue was improved when you implemented these policies. Thank you. But for the question, I think the Zambians could answer it better, why they have stopped using the lottery procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Ezekiel, do you want to come now? Or at the end, like the number of questions that whatever you prefer. Okay, let me request Joseph and then John, and then we'll come to Ezekiel, as there are many questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think there was an issue on lobbying. What I can say is that in Kenya, I think the constitution that was enacted in 2010 has really given a lot of liberties to the citizens, and they can be ready to oppose anything. So this is where actually now we need to forge strong ties with the research institutions so that any amendments to the tax statutes or introduction of any new taxes or rates should be well informed by research. Otherwise, we have very strong lobby groups, and that one will definitely be opposed. I think that's just something I wanted to respond on. The second one on tax morality. This is also where we are facing challenges in Kenya, and we have impressed upon the Ministry of Finance to be able to assist us in really ensuring that all the revenues that are collected are put to proper use and accounted for properly, because this one has really affected our efforts in collection. In fact, on the social media, we were seeing very negative comments when KRA was appealing to citizens during the month of June to file their returns. Some were saying that now, what's the point? You have already taken our funds. We have seen them being misused. We have seen corruption allegations being made about misuse of government funds. Now, what is the point of even filing returns? Yeah, so on the side of the expenditure, we would really wish that we get full support from the government in ensuring that the revenues collected are put to well use, because when citizens see their taxes being used properly, then they are also motivated to be able to remit the taxes due. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Just on the issue of the VAT, trying to incentivize the customers to demand a receipt. Currently, we're also implementing that campaign where the customers they should be demanding a receipt, and then there will be a raffle draw, which some will win different prizes. It's going to started in May, I think, it's ending in July this month. So we're here to assess the impact of this this initiative. Now, with regards to, I mentioned two gentlemen, they asked about the VAT on water. Why do we introduce the VAT on water? What were the concerns of citizens around that? I think the background to introducing VAT on water is that it's the same argument that it's always there that you can't tax basic commodities because they are consumed by the poor. But we have seen even today that there's no direct relationship, because the same products are so consumed by those who are well-to-do. So who don't the people who are poor, they should be given direct transfers other than using a tax policy on addressing social issues. So that was the motivation around that. The other thing is that water was previously zero-rated, which means that the water boards, they were claiming tax refunds on water, which they sell to consumers, because there's VAT on electricity. So in the process of supplying water, the companies, the water boards, they pay VAT, so they had to demand. So, and most of countries, they have changes in refunding tax refunds. It's a challenge for most governments. So in order to avoid that, we'll introduce a standard rate on VAT, which in my currently is 16.5. So, of course, there are people complaining, how can you introduce VAT on water? How can tax water? Water is life. But I think now people have accepted it, and it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. There were a number of questions, but I think the responses are quite brief, in the sense that the contributors actually said a lot of things to a point of answering some of them. So I think I'll just fill in the gaps and confirm certain things. The issue on lottery, Charles did help in general terms to respond to it. We did a lottery, yes, in 2013, and the program was successful. But like it has been said, in terms of its design, it was an experiment. We just had thoughts to say that if we had to do a promotional arrangement, we would encourage people to get receipts. However, in terms of doing a detailed research, we had not done that. So what we did is we designed it to be an experiment. And the outcome of that, which was the question by Philip, is that actually we saw a jump in VAT collections. And we saw that, in fact, people became more aware about the stealing that happens by the VAT registered suppliers who do not issue receipts. So it was a learning point. We saw that it worked. However, as an administration together with the ministry, we had to look at the bigger picture. And so that's how come projects like the project which is being piloted, the electronic fiscal devices, came into being. Right now, we are in pilot phase of that project, and we are thinking that that is a much longer-term solution in terms of encouraging compliance for VAT. However, as we have seen from one of the studies that was done, that program still needs to be complemented by a number of initiatives to encourage people to demand receipts. Otherwise, it fails, just like, because people can connive and between the buyer and the seller, and the immediate benefit issue becomes very important. And therefore, we also intend to introduce a bit of it in a modified version. We introduce some kind of lottery just to keep people to be aware about their obligation to demand receipts. But we intend to do a little bit more research in this area so that we are able to have more pinpointed solutions towards this. Another issue which government thought was important and the administration was the issue of withholding VAT. We appointed, apart from the normal agency work that they do, we appointed to seal the leakage for those who were not. There were a number of smaller suppliers that would just charge VAT, but they would just disappear. These one-off businesses and so on, including some large businesses. And so to deal with that, we had to introduce the withholding VAT. So we've appointed a number of agents to actually become withholding tax agents so that they can collect VAT at source. However, one of the things that I forgot to mention, which is an area of further research, is what is the optimal rate of withholding. Currently, because we saw, in terms of the principle, we saw that it's a good program under our arrangement, but at what rate should we withhold? We are withholding currently the full rate of 16%. However, with research input, we may be able to determine an optimal rate in that area. So it's one of the areas where maybe we need to do a little bit more work. Then our investigations team and our auditors also have introduced the issue of mystery shopping, where to complement the issue of people demanding receipts, our auditors go into these shops just at random to make sure that they just become mystery shoppers, and they go with the gadgets that can record to get evidence, and electronic evidence in electronic form, fortunately now is admissible in the courts of law, and a number of people have been convicted on that account. And so that's what I can say on the issue of VAT. Now, before I move to that, there was another question related to the withholding VAT agents that we have appointed, and that they're having an advantage over others. Maybe the only thing I can say about that is VAT by its nature is an agency relationship. Even in its ordinary form before the extension of this other withholding VAT program. So in that regard, we know that, yes, it can create certain advantages, but also the same agents that you alluded to that are having an advantage. In fact, I've also complained that this is a bit of a burden on them. So it's an administrative burden that has been pushed onto them. So it's one of the areas where we need to do further inquiry, just to look at the balance of it in terms of how well it is working. But in terms of the numbers on VAT, the success has been very tremendous. But we need to look at the unintended effects that the program is creating. We know that there's room for improvement, and we can do better in that area. Philip also asked about the issue of lobbying, the power of lobbyists, and the only thing I can say is that yes, the mining firms and the other multinational enterprises have the money and have got the power to hire tax experts, and better than the authority can pay. And so it's a problem we've recognized. But of course, we know that the authority can never be at equal level with these firms in terms of competing for these good experts that can deal with this. But however, what we've done in the authority is that we have upskilled our mining unit, or the unit that deals with transfer pricing issues. We've increased on the numbers. We've diversified the skills that are required in this area, to have engineers, to have lawyers coming in. And then we've also been doing a lot of benchmarking work with other organizations. You heard, I think, one of the contributors talked about our relationship with OECD, our relationship with ATAF on transfer pricing issues and base erosion issues. IMF also comes in. They've helped us quite tremendously on that. And then we're also dealing with an issue of benchmarking with the South Africa Revenue Authority on a number of issues where they're actually doing much better. So I can say that, well, the problem is there, we know, but some of it sometimes is a bit sentimental. So what we are doing again, you know, the civil society sometimes can be sentimental about issues. We are working on a program to encourage to formulate the whistleblower policy. I think it was one of the issues that was raised earlier in the morning. The whistleblower policy and the reward policy. Once put in place, we encourage people to actually volunteer information. Currently, in fact, that policy has already been drafted, and we've made that proposal. It's under discussion with Minister of Finance. And once agreement is reached, we hope that this is going to help. So we need to do a bit of work in that area, but I think a lot has been done. Then coming to tax agents, the ones that we have chosen, the criteria used, this was floated as a public tender. And the people applied, and we applied the criteria that we had specified in the newspaper. So it was a transparent process. Unfortunately, as things stand, only 3 were shortlisted because some of them did not know how to present their documents. Others were not fit for purpose. So what we'll do is that we are going to actually re-advertise. So very soon you will see that adverts will be issued again to appoint more, because the country is widespread, and the types of taxes that we have appointed agents for are the ones for the informal sector, like base tax, turnover tax, and withholding tax on rental income, among the 4 that are there. Then lastly, I think I want to just...
I think Denis has just given us marching orders that
we have overshot.
Time, so
Actually,
maybe you can address those offline.
Of course. I think the other things we can do them bilaterally. In the interest of time, I will hand the mic.
Unless any member of the panel has any burning remark, Billy, do you want to say something like that? Okay.
Thank you so much. I felt this is burning. The beauty of us working with external researchers will reduce such questions. I think my colleague has labored so much, and this always happens to us. When we go out to engage, we end up having to answer all these questions. So for me, I see the beauty of working together with local researchers, international. We'll have more ambassadors, and we'll look at issues all around, and we'll be able to reduce on these questions and also satisfy our clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Millie, for a great, I would say, finale. I couldn't have concluded it better. With collaborations, with these great ideas that practitioners have, and with some of the skills or comparative advantage that researchers bring, we'll be in a better position to address many of the questions that have been asked by the audience. Let me thank my panelists. Thank you very much. You did a great job. Let me also thank Denis, who had to leave to catch his flight. Thank you very much, panelists.